Welcome to another edition of the Sim Racing Garage. I'm Barry Rowland. In this episode, I'll be reviewing the new Scorpion actuator from the guys at PT Actuator, with some sound-looking internal design and parts upgrades that increase the Scorpion's weight capacity by 50 kilograms. Can PT Actuator do this without affecting the already great performance of their previous monster actuators? Time to put it through the SRG's review process and see how they do. So, let's get to it. So let's take a closer look at the Scorpion series actuator. Obviously, this is the new actuator that's replacing the monster actuator that PT Actuator sold beforehand. Now, it's the same length as the monster. It's the same piston size, which is 50 millimeters as the monster, has the exact same motor on it as the monster. But here's where the differences come in, and that's the internals of the actuator assembly itself. This is 80 millimeters in diameter, where the monster was 70 millimeters in diameter. And it's also increasing the lifting weight limits over the monster. And I want to show you the little label on there. Now, this thing's pretty heavy. It's 8 kilos, or if you live in North America, that would be 17 pounds, 13 and a half ounces, or very close to 18 pounds. I'm going to kind of slide this over here a little bit and grab it so you guys can read the label. There we go. And you'll see that it has the Scorpion Sting for simulators on here. And the model number has changed, obviously, from the monster. And the force is really the only number that's changed here. Again, the model number and a serial number is different. But the 200, or 2,000 rather, N. Now, what that means is the lifting force of this actuator. And 200 really means, or rather 2,000 really means 200 kilograms, right? Now, the monsters were 1,500. So they were 150 kilograms rather, which is 330 pounds. So at 2,000 N, this means it goes up to 441 pounds. So the weight capacity is increased on this. The speed at 250 millimeters per second and the stroke at 150 millimeters has all remained the same. So everything else is the same on the monster. And the motor, I'll show you the label on this. There it is exactly the same numbers as the motor on the monster. So none of that changed. So really what we've got here is a new actuator assembly over the monster. Slide this up. So I'm actually going to do a comparison on the Scorpion actuator assembly and a monster actuator assembly. And we're going to tear them down and look at the differences on the assembly part and try to identify what makes this one more capable as far as the weight limits go than the monster was. But other than that, they're the same. So if you already have a monster, I would not worry too much about the Scorpion coming out. But yeah, they are going to this. But you know, PT Actuator is an innovator as far as their company is concerned. They are always trying to find better ways to build something. And yeah, this is the result of a lot of research that they did when they had the monsters, then they were working with those. Now, of course, again, same servo motor. We have our encoder cap over here on the top, and we have our cords coming out. Now, the cords themselves, I haven't even opened this yet, they should be what we call grounded. All right. Now, I know the power one is grounded because I took it off. I think I took a look at it, but I was looking for something on the labeling. A lot of times you get these cables and you can see if it has any shielding labeling on it. And this one doesn't look like it does, but I know that PT Actuators told me, just like the monsters, the power cable here has a ground wire in it for shielding, right? And of course it has a copper mesh all the way down it too. Now this cable here for the power doesn't have any indication on any shielding either. I'm kind of looking at it, just has actually just has a name on it. So I'm assuming this one is not shielded. But again, once we do the look inside, when we start taking this stuff apart, I might pull these apart and take a look at it and see what they look like. So there we have it. Not much else to talk about on this actuator. The new Scorpion gets stung by the Scorpion actuator. So yeah, when we come back, we'll probably just go ahead and start doing a comparison on the actuator assemblies on the previous monster that I have and a Scorpion. So yeah, looking forward to that. Here is the bracket that we're going to be using to mount our new Scorpion actuators. It's very similar to the old one. I have the old one right here. It has the same amount of holes. It has 2 columns of 9 M8 holes, just like this one does. And the old one obviously has the 4 holes on each side to mount our M8 bolts into the side of the actuator housing, because none of that has changed. But as you can see, this one has PT actuator cut out on the side panels here. And there is a flange on the bottom. See that? With 3 holes in it. And that's another support element that they've added into the bracket. In their research and development, they came up with that. So how's that going to fit on the bottom of the actuator? Well, if you look at here, and this is how the actuator is going to be sitting, because the Scorpion logo will be on the outside. We'll be able to see the PT actuator sticker here. And on the bottom, I can do this and show you guys this. Actually, all the way around this cup here, see this cup that goes around? And that has the seal in it for our piston that goes in and out. There are, you can see there's some cap head bolts in there, but every other hole there is no bolt. And that's an M6 threaded hole in there. And we have one, if we hold this straight, let's see if I can get this straight here. We should have one down the center right here that's open, and it is. Then we have another one over, let's see, here we go. There's the center one. Then we have one over here, then we have one over there. In between these cap bolts that are securing this cap on the bottom of the housing itself. So this will fit in like this. Get this over here. And we're just going to kind of drop it in like that. And this rear, or the bottom piece here is going to go up against that flange. I can keep this from sliding apart like that. And we'll be putting our M6 bolts in there in the 3 holes, and it should line up. Hopefully it does. We'll see once we get it mounted. And yeah, you know, another support element on the bracket, there's no harm in that. I'm not sure if they really needed that, but this is lifting a little bit more, or it has the capacity to lift a little bit more than the Monster, as we saw that the 2000N versus the 1500N. So that's going to help support all that, right? Now, it's also going to be a little tight, if you look at it here, to get your bolts in there. So what I'll probably do is get my bolts finger tightened when I first put this on here and put the actuator in the bracket, so that I'm going to go ahead and then let the feet down. And once the feet down go a little bit further, it'll be easy to get a wrench in here, and it'll be no problem tightening that up, or tighten it up here. Obviously, we need to get it in there. So yeah, I like what he's done here. And you know, the aesthetics of the PT actuator on the bracket don't hurt either, I guess. Plenty of holes, by the way. That's what I like about these brackets. To mount them, we have plenty of selection as far as the height goes. As long as you're using 4 of the holes somewhere. We actually have 4 M8 bolts holding this bracket on. And I do like that about the PT actuator setup. When I first put a bracket on, when I was doing the original PT actuator review, where I built the whole cockpit, and you guys saw where I installed the brackets and then installed the actuators inside them. And yeah, that was 8 of these M8 bolts, which gave me a sense of confidence that it will never come loose. Anyway, so there it is. A little bit different than the original, with a little extra flange there, basically, and some different cutouts on here for the PT actuator logo. But other than that, it's the same thing as far as the length and stuff. So let's go ahead and get this over to the rig and mount it up. So I thought I'd show you guys some of the differences between the Monster, which was the previous actuator from PT Actuator, and the new Scorpion over here, represented by these 2 housings. All right. Now, first off, let's talk about, and I'll be doing this a lot because this stuff is greasy. I had to take it all apart. Let's talk about the ball screws. And for those of you who don't know what a ball screw is, it's this assembly here. It's used in actuators everywhere. So what this is, as you can see, it's a very long screw. But these screw grooves in here are kind of wide, and they're very smooth. And that's because there's ball bearings inside of what we're calling the ball and flange assembly here. So that, and it's in a spiral pattern that matches the spiral angle, or pitch, if you will, of the angle here. And as we turn this back and forth, because this flange is attached to the piston leg, or the piston right here, it's pushing it back and forth. And that's where we get our motion from. So yeah, when you look at it this way, it's pretty simple what's going on here, right? We got the electric motor that's doing the work, right? Turning this thing back and forth. It's a very smooth, precision feeling piece here. And these are from TBI Motion, which is a relatively recognized industry standard kind of ball screw assembly. And they've got good record as far as going bad and things like that. A lot of people use them, so they must be pretty good as far as dependability. I'm going to show you what it says here on TV, if we can read that. Because of the way the lights are, you might not be able to, but I'll take a shot at it. TBI motion, there we go. Right, so this is the one that's in the Scorpion. So if you put that one next to the one that came out of the Monster, you can see there's a little bit of difference here. And even more when I turn it around, you can see the flanges together. So those are the differences. Oops, let me get square on the camera there. So this one is a 1605. It says that in these little pieces they put in here. You read that, 1605. And this one is a 2005, and it's recessed, so I don't know how well that's going to show up, but I'll take a shot at it. You can probably see it. 2005. So what's that mean as far as measurement differences? Well, the 1605, I'm just going to measure these pieces of it. Make sure I get on the square part here. Are 27.9. So we'll say this is 28 millimeters. All right. This one over here comes in at 36 millimeters. So almost 10 millimeters, 8 millimeters difference in diameter. Although when you look at them straight on and next to each other, they look a little bit, the differences seem to be, well, let's go ahead and roll this guy down so he's even. There we go. The differences seem to be a little bit more apparent, don't they? And this one here doesn't have a threaded hole in the bottom of it, and this one does, the one that's in the Scorpion. So we got a heavier dutier ball screw assembly right off the bat, and we have this hole that has some threads in it, and that's an M8 thread, and I'll show you what that's for once we get to that part. And this one doesn't have it because it doesn't have that feature, and it's just another feature to give more stability and durability, long life, things like that, to the screw itself when it's inside of our pistons. So what we'll do next is take a look at the pistons. So now we're going to look at the pistons. And this is the one that came off of the Monster, the original one. And this has a feature on it that the other one from the Scorpion doesn't, because they have another way of doing it. The first thing you'll notice on this is that we have this little aluminum head on it, if you will, like a piston head. It even has some grooves in here for these things here, which fit into those grooves. And they're very slick plastic things. So they're friction reducing elements. And I suppose they give some kind of extra seal against the housing right here that it's sliding in and out of. So you get two of these, you get one here, and you get one over here, right? Same thing over there. You can see two of them laying over there in the background, I believe. I would call this the piston, and this, you could even call this the rod on it, like in a gas engine, you know, the rod and the piston. Anyway, this is aluminum and this is steel. And the first thing you'll notice here, again, as I said before, is that we have this groove machined in here. Now what that is for is, when you have the ball in here, let me go ahead and stick this one in. And these are very tight tolerances here, so sometimes you got to kind of wiggle this a little bit to get it to go in right, which is a good thing. We don't want it loose, do we? And if it doesn't go in right away, I'll flip it around 180 degrees and try it the other way, because I know it came out when the flanges were lined up with the screw holes. So there you go. All right. So for this purpose, I'm going to, or for this experiment, I'm just going to go ahead and throw these in real quick. Two of these, because I'm going to be pushing and pulling on it, and I don't want it to fall apart, so I can demonstrate what's going on. So bear with me as I roll these in. Don't have to get them too tight. I just don't want it to come off. All right. And you can see the screws moving. Pretty slick, huh? All by its lonesome. Again, now that this flange on the ball assembly is attached to our piston, now we're ready to do some movement, right? Because this is the leg, and it's going to be moving back and forth inside of our housing and coming out the bottom. Now, this groove is going to help us do something. With the motor attached to the end of this and turning back and forth real fast or doing long strokes, remember this is a 6-inch actuator, there is a tendency for this piston itself to turn from the torque of the motor going back and forth. So twisting inside of our housing over here, which we don't want. Obviously we want to stay straight. So that's what the groove is for. And the Monsters, how they approached that issue was the housing itself has this screw in the bottom cup. I didn't take this cup off because I didn't need to. I got everything out the other way. So believe me, it's not easy taking these things off. It's another thing. You have to put a lot of heat on these things to get like this bearing cup on the top. You have this bearing cap. That thing, I had to heat it for a long time to get it out. And I've got a good heat gun. Anyway, so this screw, let me go ahead and pull that out. We would tighten it down. Obviously, it's kind of proud right now. I would tighten this down all the way down until it went into the groove here. I'm going to pull this screw out so you can see. There's also another end to this that's machined down. I think that's enough so that it will ride in that groove. Stick it there. You see, there it is. It's got that smooth part right there. So that goes into the groove, right? So that'll keep it from twisting on us as it's going back and forth with that screw in it. And then, of course, this was greased up, so yeah, that keeps any friction from coming into to be a problem. So that was why they put this groove in here. Now, the Scorpion has a different solution to that, and we'll see that as we go along. This is a good solution, but there's another one that's supposed to work a little bit better, and spread the load a little bit better on it. So I'm going to go ahead and show you this. This is very smooth. These ball, in fact, just gravity will get this thing to turn. I can just hold it down at the bottom and let go of it. And you can see that thing just takes off. And I'm going to slow it down before it bottoms out. I don't want it to slam down to the race here, which it will stop this way. All right, so it'll stop that way. But you can actually screw this whole thing out, like I said before. And yeah, if you do that, if you screw this all the way out, all the ball bearings are going to get loose in our ball part of it, and that's going to be a disaster trying to get it back in. All these little ball bearings, it's a pain. Don't ask me how I know that. All right, so that's the difference as far as these go. Now I'm going to show you that this one, let's go ahead and move you over here, doesn't have a groove in it. See how smooth that is? All right, and of course this hole is bigger because it accommodates the bigger ball screw assembly. So what they've come up with instead of the groove is this guy. This is made of really hard plastic it's very smooth. It's almost feels like it's impregnated with something, so it's very slick. But what this does is slide down onto here like this, and there's two holes in our leg or piston, whatever you want to call it. One there and one there. And these set screws are in here and over here. So we'll line those up, and then we'll set our set screws up so it's tight and doesn't go anywhere. So now we have this part that is going to go into this. This is a pretty trick. And this is why the housing is 10 millimeters larger in diameter than the previous Monster, because it needs to accommodate something more. All right. And you can see the machined slots in here that obviously match that white piece. And as that goes in, that gives us our anti-torque or twist feature. And of course, it also slides back and forth inside of our housing in here. All right. And I don't have anything in the bottom supporting it, so I'll just use that for an example. I'm going to pull it back out. I'm going to put this, again, I'm going to put this back together in another section of this video so you can see how one of these goes together. But that spreads the load of the twist further around. And it gives more support to the leg in general because we have all these teeth going around it as it goes up and down into our housing over here. So it's doing a couple of things. So pretty cool design. You know, I saw pictures of this, CAD drawings of this at first, and I wasn't sure why they were doing it. But once you get, it's like so many things. Once you get it in hand and see what's going on in 3D environment of real life, then you go, oh, that's pretty cool. And if you saw the hole in there, that's a breather hole, so that when the screw inside is moving back and forth, there's no compression of air anywhere. Now on the bottom here, I'm going to show you this too. I'll have this. You'll see there's a bushing here. This is a bronze bushing, and it's machined very close tolerances here, so it will, you can see I'm pushing it in, right? Now what that is for is, remember I showed you on this ball screw that has the bottom here with the threaded M8 hole in it. Now when I put this in here, see if I can get this to go in smoothly. There we go. Nice, nice. All right, so when I did that, I actually pushed that bushing back down. See that? what that bushing is for is to stabilize the bottom of this screw. We've got an M8 bolt and a big thick washer that goes into there, right? So, and when I'm assembling it, I'll show you that again as I'm doing it. So what that does is, as you can see, if this bronze piece is moving with the screw, I'll go ahead and screw it. See if you guys can see it moving there a little bit. Going the right way? Oh, it's not staying in. All right, so let me put a bolt in here real quick to keep this thing from popping out. Everything's so slick. And also, by the way, the holes in this piston are M6s, where the holes in this one, I just put screws in, are M5s. So that's gone up too. So you can see where they're adding some beefiness, if you will, which should add to durability. And that's why if you saw the closer look part, this is why when they build it this way, that they can get another 50 kilos of low capacity out of between the Monster and the Scorpion. All right, so that's not coming out anymore. So I'm gonna screw this in, and that bushing should, you see how it's moving up? So with the bolt in the end of that, as it's moving up and down, see if I take it down now though, the bolt's not with it and you can see it coming away from it, but I can just push it back on there if I want to. But the bolt's gonna keep that on there. So as this is going, the screw is going in and out, we've got another support mechanism inside internally to our rod or leg, which is very nice to have indeed. I really like that. Little things like that, when I see it, I say, man, that's smart that they did it that way. Whereas this one didn't have any mechanism like that. Let's go ahead and spin this back down. Let's see the end of the, there you go. So that was just sitting there like that. How about that? So yeah, I think anybody that looks at the differences between that would rather have this one over here than that one. Not that it needed it, because there's plenty of support for the screw right in here, right in this section where the ball is bolted. But still, just from visual looking, you'd say, well, yeah, this is something I'd rather have if I have a choice, right? So yeah, now we have a choice in the Scorpion. So the other differences, well, there are no other differences between these, except there's a little differences in the bearing caps. Here we have, obviously this is a smaller one because the diameter is smaller. These two bearings did not stay with the cap. They actually came out. And so I had to pull them off of this part because the bearings actually sit down on these races here. See that smooth part? The bearing actually sits down in that. Pull that back up. And there's the stop for it. So you got two bearings stacked in here, like here. See how they're internal to this one? There's two of them in there. Go that way and this way. They go onto the races that are on the top of the screws here. Makes sense, right? So we got two bearings, and these bearings, are they the same size? I think they're different, yeah. 6303Zs are on the Scorpions. You see that number there? Two of those, and these are 6301s. So these are actually smaller, as you might imagine, because this piece on the Monster screw is smaller. So there you go. And I had to pull those off. Anything else? The couplers. I'm going to show you the couplers. Now, the couplers are the same, but I just wanted to show you how this works. Now, the coupler is the interface or the connection between the motor shaft with its key goes into this keyway. Take that apart. And then we tighten it down with this bolt that's not in there. It's an M6 bolt. And we reach through the coupler housing, I call these things, and there's some access holes here. You reach in with a hex wrench and you tighten that down. So it couples to the motor shaft, which is the output shaft, obviously, and does the work. And then this will stack on top of this in kind of an alternating tooth thing. See that? Now this piece here is a nylon piece that, see if I can get this to come off. Pry this off for you real quick. There we go. So this is some kind of a nylon plastic, pretty tough stuff. It feels really tough, but still flexible. And of course, this is a damper. So when we have this in here, I'll slide it back in there. And then we have this one on top of it, like this. You know, it looks like this when it's done. So now when the motor is twisting this screw back and forth with a lot of torque, a lot of force, a lot of speed sometimes, yeah, this keeps things from being so harsh as far as the feel we get from the actuator. All right, so it's a dampen type of coupler system. And you can see, again, this is the bigger piece. That's for the motor shaft and its key. I'll slide in there. And these are the M6 bolts I was telling you about, little socket cap head units. We got one down here, and we got one down here for the interface with the actual screw that's in the ball screw assembly. And you can see it's keyed also because there is a keyway in these shafts. See it there? And the key is over here. So I'll be putting that back in once I start my assembly process, or during the assembly process anyway. So that's about it. We got these two lock nuts here that are going to go in to lock everything down on top of the bearing caps. But again, we'll see that in the assembly. And because there's two of them, we'll use them in, I'll tighten this one down first, and then I'll tighten this one down on top, and that'll lock it down. Right. I think that's about it as far as the differences between these guys. Maybe some fitment differences. This one here fits in, let's see. Oops, wrong way. This one here fits in the housing this way. And this is obviously the Scorpion's bearing cap. Fits in there like that. And then we have the housing that sits on top of that, like that. And the housing has another piece there that locates it in top of the bearing cap like that. And then of course we bolt it down. But again, when I put this thing together and do the assembly, you'll see all that as a step-by-step process. That's about it as far as doing the comparison video, I think. I thought I would do a little video here showing you guys how to put one of these Scorpions together. I've already taken this apart so I could show you that. And if you ever have to do any maintenance, you want to go in and re-grease things of that nature, then this is how it would go back together. And of course, taking it apart is the reverse of what I'm going to be doing here. Pretty simple stuff here. I might fast forward some of the bolting sequences because, that takes a little bit of time, even though I have my handy Milwaukee 3/8 drive here. Right, so first thing, we're going to want to lube up our screw, even though there is lube in the ball piece already. But it doesn't hurt to lube it up, and I use a synthetic grease when I do that. And then once I've lubed that up, I'll go ahead and install it back in the piston. No real order here as far as the orientation of our flange. Our flange has 6 holes, 3 on each side. It's just how easy it goes in. I usually just kind of get it seated and then kind of twist a little bit and see if I can get it to work in. Tolerances are tight on these things, which is a good thing. And that went in pretty well. See, it's cooperating. Now, these are M6 bolts that go in here. And these are the ones I took out. Now, I will be taking some red Loctite and putting on these bolts if I was building this to be a functional unit in my system. But I'm not. This is going to be like a spare. So if I ever need a part or something like that, I can take it off of this. So I'm just going to leave it bolted in without the normal Loctite sequence that I'll be putting, or chemicals that I'll be putting on this. And you have to do that because remember, these actuators are going to be under a lot of stress, pressure, and they're going to be moving a lot. There's going to be vibrations, and you don't want these bolts coming loose internally on you. No doubt, right? I mean, that just makes sense. So I'm going to go ahead and just run these in so that they'll sit flush like they should. All right, so we've got this screw attached like it should be. Everything's looking good here. Now there is one more thing I'm going to do because of the way the Scorpions are made. It has a hole and threads in the end of our screw. And it has this bronze bushing in here, and it's like a guide and a support for the end of this. So if I start to screw this out, you see how that bronze bushing doesn't go anywhere, right? But I can take my finger and just push it back on there. So it'll follow it up and down internally to our piston here. But I need to secure that some way, right? Simple enough. See if I can go ahead and turn this down. All right, so I wanted to get it flush again. So what I'm going to use for that is this M8 socket head cap bolt. And it has a lock ring on it. That's how it came. And I'm going to use this big thick washer. This is almost a 4mm thick washer here, a big thick piece of steel. So it should get good support around the lip or the edges of where we're bolting this in. So simple. I'll just kind of look in there, get it started. And I'm just going to run that in with my fingers. Just leave it like that for now. Like I said, I'm not going to, if I was doing this, I would probably put some Loctite on that and then go ahead and tighten it down properly. And as I get it tight enough, it's going to turn the screw, right? So I would need to hold the screw as I put a little more torque on that. But the Loctite should do its job, so I don't have to try to crank down on it real hard. Now, when the screw goes in and out, I'll get it to go out. You can see how it's pulling it with it. All the way down. And of course, if we go the other way, it's following it. And I would also put a lot of good grease in here internally so that that bushing wouldn't have any stiction when it's running back and forth. But like I said, I'm not going to do that right now. So there we have it. As far as the piston assembly, it is essentially assembled, except I don't have the foot cap on it yet, and there's a threaded piece, but I'll get that on in a minute. Now I'm going to install the anti-twist mechanism and follower, if you will. It's also going to stabilize things a little bit as the piston is going up and down because of our grooves cut into this section. You guys can see those grooves going on in there. And again, this is a pretty simple thing. We're just going to slide it into, or onto rather, the piston leg. There are two holes, one here, and they are tapped. And there's one on the other side, right? And there's our vent hole. And I'm just going to slide this up until I see these matching the holes, right? These are the grub screws. And these are 2.5 millimeter grub screws or set screws for your wrench. So I'm going to go ahead and slide that up until I can visually kind of see where it's at. And then I'll come in with my wrench, my 2.5 millimeter wrench, and kind of feel it in a little bit. It's not easy to get it exactly. I'm kind of looking sideways on it and trying to line it up to where it should be. And hopefully this won't be too tricky. It'll go in there and engage those threads without doing something weird on me. And there it is. I think it's going in. How about that? First try. Because things like this can get a little finicky sometimes. Now, all I have to do is make sure I can get this one in. So we'll go ahead and get this one started and see if it'll go in. Sure enough. Okay. Now you don't want to take it all the way as far as it will go, I don't think. I'm going to try to do that. Well, I don't think that's what you want to do though, but we'll try it. Yeah. It feels like it's going way too far to me, so I'm going to back it back out. Remember, this is just a locating. There won't be a lot of pressure on this. So I don't want this to go in too far and not engage with the plastic. If you push it too far, it'll just go into here and that'll be it. You know, it won't keep it from moving. So just put it in far enough and you can kind of gauge it by looking at the width of this or how tall that is and where the grub screw is or the set screw is located. I'm going to take this one in just a few more turns because I can see where it's at. Now I know how long it is. And of course the litmus test for me is always taking it and seeing if I can push it down, and I can't on either side. Good. So we'll call that done. Now again, this is where I would come into this piston housing and I would lube all these up, all these channels. I'd put some good grease down in here just because, right? I mean, you want some grease in there, but I probably over lube it, knowing me. And we have the seal on the bottom here. You can see that green seal, just a rubber seal, which you can see on engine blocks and things. And we also have this brown piece in there also. That's kind of another seal. It's very slick material. And I'm going to be, when I put this in, I'm going to be putting two of those on the piston in those grooves. And you'll see as that goes in what that looks like. So that should keep the grease from squeezing out too much. So I wouldn't be too worried about being liberal with it on those grooves in there. Just want to make sure there's as little stiction as possible when this thing's moving up and down and help the motor it as much as possible when I'm doing that. But again, I'm not going to be installing this, so I'm just going to kind of slide it in here to get it going. go. All right, so before I install it all the way, I want to get my rings in, kind of like piston rings, if you will. And again, this is a very slick plastic. I'm not sure what this is made of, but we got two places to put this. We have a ring here, or a groove rather. It's going to put the ring on it, and one over here. So that's where we're going to be putting it. And I'll put the first one in, and then kind of slide it in while I'm compressing it. Just like you would do if you've ever built a motor or an engine and you're putting the pistons in. Of course, they have a nice tool for that that goes over the rings for you, and you can kind of tap the piston in. But we're going to have to do this one by hand the old-fashioned way, which I should be able to do without too much trouble, I think. Just need to get it down far enough to slide it in here. There we go. So you can see how that's going in. Now, I have a gap here on that ring. So what I'm going to do is, because I'm an old engine builder, I'm going to take the other one in the gap. I'm going to put that 180 degrees on the other side, so it's not a gap here too. It's just, and I know there's no compression, and this is not a gasoline engine, but it's just one of those habit things. So I'm going to push this far enough in, but not too far, to get the other one ready to go. Now, I also have to consider what's going on inside of here on the other end, right? So it's seating well in these other pieces and not getting offline or anything. So you see how that's working? So that looks pretty good there. So I'm going to leave it there because I'm about ready at the position where I'm going to have to put the other ring on. And again, I'm going to look and make sure I see where the other ring was. Let me pull that back out. I think I've lost my position there. Okay, there it is on this side. So I'm going to go 180 degrees on this side with the other ring on the gap. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to wrap it this way. So now my gap is the other way. And the weight of this, if you pick it up, should pull this down while I'm keeping this tight up here. Hopefully this is going to work. Well, I'll tell you what, let me just lay it down and do it. Because this, I want to make sure that in here, I'm taking my finger and kind of lifting, taking pressure off the piston itself to make sure that it can slide okay while I'm putting this in. Okay. All right. There we go. So now this gap in the ring is going to be 180 degrees opposing. So now I should be able to put this in. Let's see what we got here. Okay. Oops. All right, so it popped back out on me. As you can see, this can be a little finicky. And the reason it did that, I'm going to set it on the weight now. And I see my piston in the seal. I'm just going to make sure this is going to go in. There it goes. So now my piston went past the seal. And everything's looking golden now, the way it should. So I got some gap hanging down. And that's the way it's going to look anyway when you have it on your rig. There's going to be some space in here between this and the cup that it's sitting in and the foot. Speaking of the foot, this is the foot pad, if you will. This is how we attach the foot. And this is another big steel piece here that has some M6 holes in it that are going to attach our foot, our little plastic foot piece here. And that's going to, again, screw into the piston. See all those threads there? And again, this is where I would be putting some red Loctite in this as I put it on. But again, I don't have to do that right now. It's going to make it a lot less messy for me to do this. And this is just screwed in by hand. At this point, let's see. And then I'm going to install, temporarily, these M6 short bolts that go into the foot. Because now it's going to be a matter of putting some torque on it. Not too much. I think I can do this with just a regular wrench, not get my big screwdriver out. Put these in a bit, because I don't want to put too much pressure on these bolts as I'm doing this. And what I want to do is take this, and this is just a spring steel hex head extension, 5 mil I believe it is, and just kind of screw this in. All right, that's all I'm doing. Not putting a lot of pressure on it. It got caught there. I'm going to get it where you can see it. It got caught a little bit to where I couldn't turn it with my fingers, so I used this to get it going again and used the nuts, or rather the bolts, to help me do that. Now I'm just going to turn it the rest of the way, and it made it past whatever that was. And I'll just leave them in there just in case we run into that again. And this is how I would do it with my red Loctite in there. And then it's nice and tight. You really can't get it much tight. You could, if you want to, get in here with the wrench again and just give it a little snug. But like I said, that's what the red Loctite would be for, and that would seal it in so you wouldn't have to torque it real hard. Now I could take my M6 bolts back out. And these are only 10 millimeters long. These are shorties because they don't have to be long. And now I'm ready to install my foot. And as you might imagine, this is going to be very simple. Just line it up with the holes. So I'll turn it up this way. And kind of look at it sideways so I get the holes lined up. One there, and one there. See, it's pretty easy stuff, huh? All right, I think those are 5 mils. I already have one on here. Yeah, that's good. Okay, foot is installed. Good to go. Now, I can test this by, well, actually, it's not going to do it yet because I don't have my bearings and my cap in yet. Okay, so it's feeling pretty smooth though, even without the grease in there. I know internally it's moving, but it's not pulling anything because it doesn't have anything to pull against without our bearing cap on. So let's go ahead and get that bearing cap installed. The bearings are already in here. They did not come out when I initially took this apart. So the trick is to get this back on, and these bearings are going to fit right on this race here. And this is the race stop. Okay, that's the shoulder there that it's not going to, the bearings are going to bump into that. And the threads should be showing on the other side of the bearings once I have this done. Now, the only problem is, or question, is how hard or easy is this thing going to go on here? It came off okay, but this can be a very tricky thing. Oh, look at that. Beautiful, man. How nice is that? Now, the only thing is I got to get this all the way down into like that. There we go. So see how it's sitting flush and it's rolling around a bit? That's good that it's turning that way because now I have to get in here and line up the holes for the bolts to tighten that down so it doesn't do that. Okay, so you got to kind of look down in here. You guys aren't going to see this too well because I'm the one that's got to put the bolt in. And I'm looking down in there and trying to find my holes where there are so I can line it up. Actually, I can pick it up a little bit and get a better idea. There we go. There. Okay. Now, I had to put my bolts in the top of this thing. Get it further up here so you guys can see a little closer. Now, these bolts, I believe these are the M4s. Let me make sure. Yeah, M5s. So these are the M5 bolts. Man, that bearing's going in there sweet. Usually you gotta press these things on. Of course, now that I say that, and it came off so well. Watch it not go on. You gotta be careful. These usually go when they do, and you gotta be careful. Don't get your palms pinched in there when this goes on. I know. You're thinking, well, how can that possibly happen? You'd be surprised when you're putting these kind of things together. All right, so there we go. Nice. So I should be able to drop this in here and see if we are good to go here. And this is a 4 mil bolt. It looks like it's going down. All right. So now it's just a matter of dropping the rest of our bolts in. Again, I would be putting some red Loctite on these to make sure everything gets gripped right. And I don't want to put it in the same hole I have the other one in, so I was just looking. You tapped a little bit, they all kind of fell in there. And now it's just a matter of getting them tight. I'm just going to use the socket for now because I don't need to get them super tight. When I'm running these down, typically I'll not use a lot of torque anyway, just to get them down to where they're supposed to be. And you can see how far they go down. They're actually going further than my socket will reach, but I have another 4 mil like this. It'll reach no problem. Or I could just use a regular wrench, whatever the case may be. But right now, I just want to get them down far enough to where this won't come back up. And I'll probably use this one since I don't have one handy, like I did yesterday when I was taking it apart. Now I'll just run these down with one of these. Regular little L1 I have. And I just want to snug them up so the cap doesn't come loose, so I can show you the rest of the assembly process. See how easy this is? The hard part is getting these suckers apart. Man, that is hard. You've got to, well, it's, you know, it's not so hard you can't do it, but you have to have two things. You have to have a good heat gun, and I have one that'll go up to 1100 degrees Fahrenheit, and you have to have some patience, because the heat will do the work on that Loctite that they use at the factory when they assemble these, so they won't come apart on you. But you have to be patient. So now that I have this in here and the bearing cap is installed and we have something against the ball itself on the ball screw, now when I do this, you can see it's working because we have something to press against with our bearing cap here. And now it's going out just by using my fingers to turn it, which is a good thing. And I should be able to just press down a little bit and it goes back down. Well, maybe not. Let's see, where was I going? This way. There we go. All right. So, what's left? A couple of things. We have these two lock nuts over here. What we're going to do with these is I'm going to put one on, and I'm going to put the flat side against the bearing race in here. If I can get this the thread properly. I may have goofed up some of the threads messing around with this a little bit, so it might not go in as smoothly as I would like it to. And if that's the case, let me try something else here. Let me try it the other way. Yeah, okay. And I got to get my, you want to make sure that you have this all the way out, this part of it, so this can go all the way down as far as it can. So you want this to be out as far as possible so we can get all of the grooves we can here on this thread. Now I'll take the other one. So this went down on here with the, if you look at this closely, you can see there's a beveled piece to one side of it and it's square on the other. See how flat that is? So I used the bevel down to put this on. It went on pretty smoothly. I'm not sure why it didn't go the other way. So I'm going to use the flat on this to match the flat on that. At least that's the idea. See what happens. Yeah, well, see, that one's kind of sticky too. It doesn't like to go that way. Let me try it the other way with the bevel down. Look at that. Just like easy as can be. Wow. So now it's a matter of tightening these down. And what I would do is I would take my punch out like this. I would take my brass hammer and I would go into the first one, the one that's up against the bearing face itself, and just tap it. But when you do that, our screw shaft is going to move when we turn that. See, I can just turn it with my fingers here just by using the locking thing. So what you're going to have to do is, what I typically do is put the key in here, and then I'll put some protection on it, because all you're really doing is holding it, and put some protection on it so it can't move. Some tape or something, then clamp down on it with some vice grips or something. And so I didn't want to scar up this end of the, obviously, in my shaft. So you have to be careful when you do that. But then once I had that, I would have the wrench laying here so this could not move. And then I would tap these down tightly, right? Tap that one. Then I'd go in and tap the locking one on top of it. Simple. But again, if you use a wrench like that, or if you don't have a special tool for that that can go in and grab the key slot, and they make things like that, and not mar anything, then what you're going to have to do is be careful. Like I said, if you wrap some painter's tape stuff around, like that around, you can really get a good grip on it to where you can tighten this down properly. At least that's what I do. All right, so let's go ahead and get this thing. I'm turning it clockwise, so I'm bringing this back in. So what else do we have to do? Well, now that I have my shaft out here, I need this key installed. Okay, and the key depends on, sometimes when you look at these keys, one side is beveled and the other one is not. And sometimes it's not the easiest thing to get a key in these shafts. So I'm going to see how this is fitting. And sometimes you can just get, again, a nylon hammer and tap it in. There we go. See, my key is installed now. Okay, and the reason I did that is because I'm going to have to put this guy on it, and that's the coupler. So this is the smaller hole. There's the bigger hole. That's for the motor and its key, and this will be for the shaft here. Right? But this won't fit through the hole. So I can't put this on until I get this puppy on. Right. So let's go ahead and put this on. Now I call this the coupler housing because that's really what it's doing. It's housing coupler, and it's attaching obviously to the top of our actuator here. And not only is it the coupler housing, but our motor is going to mount on the top of this in these 4 holes here. And these are M6 bolts here. So our electric motor goes in, the shaft would go into the big end here with its key on the shaft, and there we have it. So let's go ahead, and if you notice there's a raised area here, and this has to be able to go into the top. Get this out of the way so I don't knock it over. So see how it's recessed down in there? So that should be enough recess there to accommodate this. I'm just going to kind of put it on there. And again, I want to be able to line it up to get my bolt holes lined up. And there's 6 bolts here, and it's going to be these guys here. These are all M6, and they have a M5 hex on the top, socket head cap units. So I'm going to kind of do the same thing I did before. I'm going to look where the bolt holes are going to be, kind of line it up, and then bring it straight up. And look at that, that fell right in. That's beautiful. So I don't have to, sometimes they're really tight, and you might have to tap it in or turn it upside down once you have your holes aligned and kind of just go like that to get it to seat. But this just fell right in, very nice. Don't have to mess with it. So now the only problem is getting our bolts in this thing, because you can see how far down in the housing that is. So first I've got to align my holes, and you guys get the idea what I'm doing here, but you're not going to be able to see exactly how I'm doing this. Okay, those holes look like they're lined up, and that's what I've done. In fact, let me change this angle just a bit here so you can see what's going on. There we go. I'm going to take one of these, and I'm just going to put it on the end of my little extended M5 hex wrench. And then I'm going to look down in here, kind of holding everything at once and tilt it over a little, looking for my holes. And if I hold this sideways, it won't come off. I'm just going to kind of go in there gently, carefully, and then put one in. Then once it's in, I can just kind of stand it up again and slide it on in. So that's what we're going to do for these 5 here. And I'll probably speed this up so you guys don't have to sit there and watch me do the same thing over and over again. So you can see that I got so excited they were going in so well that the last one actually fell off the bench and I had to go get it. But you know, that's part of assembling things sometimes. So now that they're in there, I can go in and put my wrench in, and then I would go in and torque them down properly. And remember, again, I would have had some red Loctite on these guys because I don't want them coming loose. And that would mean that when I wanted to take this apart again, I'd have to come in with my 1100 degree heat gun and start heating this up all the way around, slowly turning it and heating it and turning it and heating it. And eventually this bolt will get hot enough and the Loctite will release enough to where I can take it out. It's a bit of a process to do that. So if you're going to be taking one apart, be prepared for that. Or just have somebody else do it for you if you don't have that kind of patience. So everything is snug enough on here, I think. Just checking it. So I can go in for my last bit here of the assembly before. Of course, I would be putting the motor on too, but I don't have a motor to put on, so we'll just have to imagine that I did that afterwards, which is no big deal. You just slide the motor on, just like everything else we've built here. Bolt it down, make sure that obviously it's lining up with a coupler that's going to be sitting in there. Speaking of which, we're going to go ahead and set our coupler in. And I'm looking to find out where the key is. And if you see, it's right there on the top. All right, so I need to take, let's just set this down before I drop it, and make sure my keyway here is lined up with that as I'm trying to push this on. Make sure my bolt is good and loose but not so loose that it's ready to fall out. Because that would be, then you have to take everything back apart. All right, so I'm going to turn it around here so I can see what's going on inside. And then I'm going to look at my key here where it's lined up. And try to go in here. And actually, you can kind of look through this sometimes if there's enough light and see where the key needs to be. And hopefully this will go on in. There it is. Now, it's on there. I'm trying to push it down. There we go. Now, if it doesn't push down like that, and you can see it's fully seated, at least I can see where it's the top of the shaft of our screw is now even where it should be inside the coupler. I don't know how that's showing up for you guys, but I can see it's all the way down. That's the important part. So once it is all the way down, then I will again come in, and then I'll kind of turn this around. See these holes here? These are the holes for access to those bolts, so that I can tighten them down once this coupler's in there, because obviously I can't get anything in the side around here to tighten that down. So that's what these holes are for, the little access holes for the coupler bolts. And again, these are 5mm units. So I'm going to look in here sideways and turn it until I can see the head of that bolt. And if I don't see it at first and I just see a hole, then I know I'm 180 degrees off or so, and I got to keep turning it. And there it is. All right. So now I can see it. I'll line it up a little better. You guys probably aren't going to be able to see it. Nah. Maybe a little bit in there, but there it is. So now I'll take my extension, and I'll go in there, kind of get it seated in that, and then I'll tighten her down. And of course I would put a wrench on the end of it and get it good and tight. So that would be it. That's the end of the build. Of course I would test at this point. I can get my fingers in here and turn this. So I would turn it, and turning it counterclockwise, the actuator piston comes out like it should. There we go. So everything's working as it should. I would probably run it all the way out, but I'm not going to do it right here. And then, yeah, then I could probably push this back down. There we go. Of course, I don't have anything lubed in here, remember. If I had it lubed, it would go down a lot easier. So there you have it. The assembly of the new Scorpion actuator from PT Actuator. And I have to say, after seeing the differences or the improvements and changes that PT Actuator has made between the Scorpion and the Monster, if you saw the comparison segment, you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, after I've seen how both of them are built, I just have a warm, fuzzy feeling when I have these on my rig now, just because of the way it was built. So yeah, now all the little improvements that were made in here, I can see why that they've taken this from a 150 kilogram to a 200 kilogram per actuator rating based on everything I've seen. And you can see you could probably maintain one of these things yourself. You know, every year or two, I might want to take this out and just re-lube everything, clean everything up, re-lube it, reassemble it, and yeah, keep running it, because this is one of those things that should run a long time. And I think they come with a pretty good warranty anyway, but yeah, this just gives me confidence. And I don't know about you guys after seeing everything, that this is going to be a long-lasting actuator. But then again, you never know. Things do break, and we have no control over that sometimes. So yeah, hope you enjoyed the assembling the Scorpion segment. Now I have the Scorpions mounted, and very simple matter here. Well, not that simple. Of course, a lot of bolting and unbolting to do. But anyway, what I did was raise the system up using my emergency switch, the standby button, and then blocked it up underneath so it was easy to set it back down like air jacks in a real race car. Set it back down on the blocks, and then I had plenty of room to get the old actuators off and the new ones on. And the brackets here went on just like the other brackets, the older brackets for the Monsters, as you saw if you saw the segment on the mounting when I was showing you how those brackets were made. So yeah, the same 8 M8 bolts in there. Yeah, no big deal there. It bolted in just like the other one. When we put the actuator in, again, it's the 4 bolts on each side, and those are M8s. And then, of course, we have those extra bolts at the bottom down here that are bolting the bottom of that bracket's flange into the bottom cup of our piston housing, which is just an extra piece there. I really like that they did that. Didn't have to do that. But it's a great way to add a little more support for the lateral motion there as far as the actuator being bolted up here and then any lateral forces when we're going sideways, especially when we're going to put sway on this eventually. I think that's a good piece to have on there. And yeah, everything else is good. Again, it's just one of those things where it's a little bit thicker, the tube is, but yeah, it fills the brackets in a bit more than before because I can't get my zip ties in for cable management like I did before. But that's okay. I can live with that based on all the other good stuff that I'm getting with a Scorpion upgrade. Didn't have to do much as far as recabling. All we really had to do was come over here and undo these aviation style connectors and screw the new ones in, and yeah, we were done. So there we have it, all mounted, lowered back in. We tested already, and now it's time to get in and do some real driving. We are at Sebring, and we are in iRacing in the Ferrari 488 GT3, as usual, for our test bed. Now, the first thing I'd like to say is, well, I don't have a lot to report here as far as changes. It feels pretty much, as far as I can tell, exactly the same as when I had the Monsters attached over the Scorpions. And this is a good thing in my book, because, yeah, you have to respect the old sayings that don't fix it if it ain't broke, don't mess with success, things like that, because the original Monster actuators, I really didn't find anything wrong with them. They were great performing actuators. So when PT Actuator said that they were coming out with Scorpions with improved design elements over the Monsters, I was a little concerned, but also excited to see what they were coming up with as far as design changes, because I didn't want them to mess up what I already had that was running and that I liked. And I'm sure a lot of people are the same way when it comes to these types of things. I'm happy to report that really everything is fine, and it works just as it did before. I really try to find some kind of tangible difference between the performance of the Monster and the Scorpion in real life. And when I'm in the cockpit like this and I'm pushing hard, yeah, there's no difference. It felt exactly the same to me personally. And what else can you say about that? It's nothing to report, which again, I think is testament that they did their homework and they approached this correctly, to where they didn't introduce some type of artifact that wasn't there before, and while they were attempting to make things better, which they have. And if you saw the comparison segment of this video, then you would know the differences internally, what they've done to bolster the, not so much the performance, but the durability. And also the weight capability has gone up 50 kilos per actuator because of the way that they make them now with the beefier internals. So that being said, there's not much else for me to talk about here. To be honest, it's just doing the job it should be doing. I'm having a blast pushing hard in this Ferrari at Sebring, and it's giving me all the sensations that I expect when I'm in a motion simulator and have it dialed in. So yeah, I have nothing to complain about here, and they're just doing what they're supposed to do. And yeah, hats off that PT Actuator has come up with a different design. I will tell you this, it does give me a bit of a more of a, let's say, a warm fuzzy feeling that I'm running the Scorpions instead of the Monsters, because now I know the difference of this internal construction and the upgrades that they made to the actuators themselves. So yeah, that makes me feel better about the actuator in general, because now I know more about it, if you will, and I know that you can tell the differences, that yeah, this is going to be a more durable unit than the Monster actuator was, which is a good thing. Right, so yeah, that's about it. So we'll get on to the final thoughts. Final thoughts on the new Scorpion actuator from the guys at PT Actuator. It's always good to see a manufacturer making efforts to improve on their products, especially when it's easy to see that the product could be improved upon. But I always considered the Monster actuator from PT Actuator to be a solid, well-performing unit. So, what needed improving? Apparently a few things. We now have a larger TBI ball screw unit in the Scorpion, moving from a 1605 unit found in the Monster to a beefier 2005 unit. This should give the Scorpion a longer life cycle for this part of the actuator's construct, along with a new anti-twist solution using a 6-tooth gear and 6 grooves machined into the piston housing unit. This will spread the twisting load on the piston across a larger area, instead of the single machine groove in the piston shaft used before. Another change here is the new bronze support bushing being used inside the piston to support the end of the screw element in the ball screw unit. Where there was no support before, now we have support for the screw's end along the entire stroke of the piston's travel. All these changes come together to create a more robust way to construct their actuators, and is the reason the new Scorpions have an increase in their weight capacity to 200 kilograms from the Monster's previous weight capacity of 150 kilograms. I was also able to convince the guys at PT Actuator to send me a sample actuator so I could tear it down and do a direct comparison on the differences between the Monster and the Scorpion. This also allowed me to do a build video for those who would like to perform their own maintenance on the new Scorpions, something I will be doing every 2 years or so, I think. Overall, I am pleased to see that PT Actuator was able to improve upon their Monster design without affecting the already great performance I was getting from the Monsters. Now, when I'm running the Scorpions, I get a good feeling about just how long these units should last. I'm Barry Rowland. Thanks again for watching the Sim Racing Garage channel. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. And if you would like to help support what I do here at the SRG, visit my website at simracinggarage.com.